The Uptime Wind Energy Podcast, brought to you by StrikeTape, protecting thousands of wind turbines from lightning damage worldwide. Visit striketape.com. And now your hosts, Alan Hall, Rosemary Barnes, Joel Saxum, and Yolanda Padron.
Welcome to the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Hall. I'm here with Yolanda Padron and Joel Saxum. Rosemary Barnes is on holiday. Well, we're here to talk about the TPI Composites bankruptcy hearings, and there's been so much happening there behind the scenes. It's hard to keep track of, but we've done a deep dive and wanted to give everybody at least a highlight of what has happened over the last couple of months. So if you do own Vestas or GE turbines, you understand what the situation is. And as we all know, TPI Composites, was the world's largest independent of wind blade manufacturing. They were it. They built blades for Vernova, Vestas, Nordex. They built blades for almost everybody. Names that basically power the global energy transition. And then, and a lot of people don't know this, but back in December of 2023, TPI struck a deal that is drawing some fire right now. TPI swapped $436 million in preferred stock for $393 million in secured debt held by Oaktree Capital. And by August of last year, just a couple of months ago, TPI filed for Chapter 11. Now the blade maker's assets are being carved up and sold, and two of wind energy's biggest players are stepping in to keep production running while the bankruptcy plays out. Now, Joel and Yolanda, I think the bankruptcy of TPI sort of came to the industry as a little bit of a shock. Obviously, the price had fallen quite a bit. If you've watched the stock price of TPI Composites, it had been dropping for a while and didn't have a lot of market value. However, GE and Vestas both have manufacturing facilities basically with TPI Composites and needs them to produce those blades. So the filing of the bankruptcy, I'm sure, was a nervous point for Vestas and GE being really the two main ones.
Well, I think, and we talked about this a little bit off air, is it shouldn't just be Vestas and GE nervous about this now. It should be every operator that's either in development or still has blades under warranty. And this is not a U.S. problem. This is a global problem because TPI is a global company that serves global industry all over the place. Right, we know that a large percentage of their throughput was GE and Vestas, but also Siemens Gamesa is in there. You name it, right? Any major operator is going to have some blades built by TPI or major OEM. So there isn't going to be much of a dark corner of the wind industry that this issue doesn't touch. So I think that one of the issues here is we've heard about some issues going on with TPI, but it was almost like they'll be okay. Something will happen. I mean, Yolanda, you had said, what was it that you said earlier? Like the kind of the feeling about it?
They'll take care of it. The OEMs will take care of it and we'll be fine.
Someone's going to support this thing.
Yeah. I think teams, you're definitely right, Joel. Teams really do need to at least think of a plan B or a plan C to have when the dust settles so you're not scrambling.
Yeah, and it hasn't really played out that way. Vestas has stepped in a little bit, and GE has stepped in, not in terms of acquiring any of the major assets, but I think the first question is, what is Oaktree Capital's role in all of this? And that is being played out right now in front of the bankruptcy court. So when you go to bankruptcy, there's obviously a lot of oversight that happens there. And when TPI Composites entered bankruptcy, there's a creditors committee had a bunch of questions about that transaction. They pointed to a December 2023 refinancing deal with Oaktree, in which creditors were really suspicious of, basically saying that TPI was already insolvent in 2023. And Oaktree exchanged equity for secured debt, jumping ahead of everybody else in line to get paid. So because Oaktree has secured debt, they're first in line to get paid. If WeatherGuard was involved selling parts to TPI, which thank goodness we weren't, we would be unsecured. They wouldn't have to pay us. So Oaktree would get paid first, and everybody else who's unsecured gets paid later. That's okay. I mean, that's the way they structured it. But this has led to a problem, right? So that Oaktree was supposed to release about $20 million in funding to keep the factories open. And that happened just a couple of weeks ago. And Oaktree refused to do it. So the amount of cash flow to keep the factories open was a real issue. TPI was in front of basically the court saying, we're in trouble. We're going to become insolvent. We don't have cash flow to keep the doors open. So the blade factories nearly shut down a couple of weeks ago. However, there was the settlement just after that in regards to Oaktree about when the payouts happen, what Oaktree will receive, which basically is most of whatever's going to happen here. So whatever TPI decides to sell or can sell, Oaktree is going to be the recipient of those funds for most of it.
I think the difficult thing here for the general listener, me included, is understanding that this is a very complicated legal process that's governed, and it's global, right? So it's governed in certain court systems in different places. And because there is also the idea of, like, say, in the United States, the SEC, Securities and Exchanges Commission, that kind of regulates these publicly traded companies, there's a lot of lights and there's a lot of lawyers and there's a lot of jargon involved in this thing. And but basically what we're saying is the way the process works when you have a bankruptcy and insolvency. If a company has debt to certain people, there may be a list of 100 people, there may be a list of 2, doesn't matter. There's certain classes of debt, right? And Oaktree has secured debt, which means they get paid first if there's anything, right? If this bankruptcy goes and gets sell this, sell that, sell this, whatever's left goes to the secured debt, and then it goes to unsecured debt. And sometimes there can be different classes of unsecured debt as well. But if there's not, some of it just goes by like date or value, or everybody gets a percentage. It just kind of all depends on how it works out in the specific court system that the stuff takes care of. But that person that is the top, in this case, Oaktree Capital, right, based out of LA, but offices all over the world. They got about $200 billion in real estate equity and debt assets, or I guess valuation. I wouldn't say assets. They are the debtor in possession. So they're the one that's kind of like top of the heap. They're kind of controlling how the restructuring and or sale goes alongside the court system.
And the trouble is that when you have unsecured and secured debt, everybody that's unsecured wants to get paid. So any material supplier that has been selling product to TPI over the years usually has a 30, 60, 90, maybe 120 days after they deliver the product to when they get paid. In that time frame, if bankruptcy happens, all that product that's sitting on the floor at TPI, you sort of lost it. You can't get it back, and you're not going to get paid for it if ever. What do you do? And so you start filing claims, but those claims most likely will never get paid, or if they will, they're going to get pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, and I would imagine, like, so, when we sit here and say from the weather guard hat, right, we put a thing out to a client, net 15, net 30, we expect to get paid in that amount of time. That's kind of how basically us forwarding credit to someone else. That's how it works. And if you work within the wind industry, you know that the OEMs, because they are the OEMs, they have a heavier hand. Sometimes they're net 90, net 120. Once they're cool with your invoice. So you could see that some of these people that have, and TPI falls within that OEM category, right? You can see that they more than likely will have had longer, more favorable terms for themselves with some of these sub-suppliers. And the sub-suppliers are, think about TPI blades. It is composites, it is fabric, it's resins, it's all of those supply companies. And there may be some other debt in there that we're not sure of. We saw some stuff with some OEMs. Maybe they have some exchange agreements. You paid up front for some blades or something of that sort. You didn't get them. I don't know. But there is also, and this is the one that kind of hits home to some of our listeners. Not only some of our listeners are those supply chain companies that support them, but a lot of them are ISPs, right? So we were just talking to someone who, just a couple weeks ago that had done some inspection work for TPI that they're not going to get paid for. We have seen on the creditors list of some ISPs that we know they're not going to get paid. And those are people out doing warranty repairs and those kind of things over a course of time. And they may have had a net 30, net 60, net 90 days payment, but I'm sure that stuff is well and long gone. They probably have invoices due for a year now. But this downfall of TPI, what's going on with them, it affects a lot of people in the wind industry. Having been on the short end once in my career of an unsecured debt, when the client or the purchaser of services went into bankruptcy and losing a whole bunch of cash, and there's nothing you can do about it except for be mad and stew over it and learn from your mistakes. It's a tough place to be.
Australia's wind farms are growing fast, but are your operations keeping up? Join us February 17th and 18th at Melbourne's Pullman on the Park for Wind Energy O&M Australia 2026, where you'll connect with the experts solving real problems in maintenance, asset management, and OEM relations. Walk away with practical strategies to cut costs and boost uptime that you can use the moment you're back on site. Register now at WOMA2026.com. Wind Energy O&M Australia is created by wind professionals for wind professionals, because this industry needs solutions, not speeches.
The problem with TPI has been keeping the doors open, and they went in front of the court and said, we have a liquidity problem. Vestas bought those two factories, those two LLCs, for $10 million each. That was the agreement. During that transaction, TPI asked for another $55 million. And it's in the transcripts. You can go listen to this down and listen to it, but obviously the Vestas representatives were, no way, we're not doing that. We're in good faith decided to buy these two pieces. So $10 million a factory is a pretty decent price, but they are still in a liquidity challenge. So GE Vernova and Vestas don't want the blades manufacturing to stop. They have customers who need blades, and so they need these TPI factories to keep running. GE Vernova is providing emergency financing through what the court calls GERNA, GERNA. It's a liquidity agreement. They also signed a long lead materials agreement to keep raw materials moving into the plants. Vestas provided cash advances to keep production going at the Mexico facilities also. So for now, everything continues to be running, but essentially GE and Vestas are paying for the materials to keep the production line going. And there's on the back end of this, TPI is essentially going to charge GE Vestas less for the blades when they roll off the line because they advanced them those funds. So TPI as an organization is still trying to continue to produce blades and trying to honor their commitments as much as they can, but they need cash, and the place they're going to go get it, or have been getting it from, is Vestas and GE Vernova.
So one would expect that either Vestas or GE Vernova would eventually just say, like, we've got to buy you. Is that a reality? Because it doesn't seem like it from the court documents and stuff. It seems like they're kind of, they don't want to get their hands into back into, in GE's case, this blade manufacturing faculties, right? They're okay right now providing cash for you guys to keep your operation running and providing us with the things we need, but we don't actually want to take it over. That's what it feels like.
Well, Vestas did, right? So Vestas took over two factories in Mexico. GE has not done that yet. And there's no indication from the proceedings that I read and all the documents that GE has made any move to do that. Vestas definitely stepped in and wants to keep the two factories running with the issues with GE Vernova and LM at the minute. And there's a lot of layoffs at LM just before the new year. It's a question of what GE will do. And it doesn't seem like, as of right now, GE is going to buy factories. Now, that being said, TPI Composites has deadlines to meet and some auctions to run. The remaining assets, the non-Vestas portion and the Turkish operations, which were sold way earlier, all of the remaining assets go up for bid on January 26th. And if no outside buyer steps in, which is very possible, Oaktree Capital can use its debt as currency to take ownership from what is called a credit bid. From there, the secured lender could convert that debt into equity. And so basically what happens is Oaktree Capital would be the holder of the company for whatever remains. But you would think that GE Vernova would want to have some piece of this to keep the blade factories running. But there's no indication of that. No one from GE has said anything. None of the filings indicate that GE wants to go ahead or GE Vernova wants to go ahead and buy the factories. Nothing like that has happened. So there may be some more financial transactions at play here. But as of right now, everything that remains for TPI Composites is going to be an auction block. Someone could walk up and, for several $1 million, obviously, acquire it. And in theory, run it.
So, I mean, Alan, you and I talked about this morning a little bit. We have seen more layoffs at LM, right? We saw more people depart, and it sounds like that building is basically a ghost town over in Denmark. GE is basically scuttling LM down to nothing. And they will more than likely either sell off whatever LM has or discontinue whatever that business model is. If that's where they're going blade-wise, wind-wise, at the same time, they've also said we're not building any more offshore turbines.
What are they doing?
I don't see them having the thirst to go scoop up or put any money into TPI. But it's like a catch-22 because they need them to fulfill the orders and stuff that they have right now. What we're staring at is basically Oaktree Composites.
There's no chance of that. The Oaktree doesn't know how to run that business. They're going to have to hire somebody to go do that. But even if they did, you still got factories in Iowa, a bunch in Mexico, other places. You have all these assets kind of spread all over the place. It's not like running an automotive dealership on the corner. You're running a major operation with thousands of employees and producing these massively complex blades. There's only a handful of companies that would be possible that could acquire that and run it with any competency at all right now.
So does Oaktree, being that Oaktree is the debtor in possession, and if possible if it rolls this way with the planned toggle right, where they would basically the sell would convert them into equity holdings and they would own it, are they the gatekeepers to who can bid? Like, do they control GE, you can bid, Vestas, you can bid, or does the court control that?
The court controls all of that. So it's all part of the Chapter 11 proceedings. Anybody can walk up and put a bid in. And now whether it qualifies or not is a good question, but anybody can walk up and make a claim for what remains. Right? There is a process that will happen there, but who else would it be? Nordex? I don't think so. Is Vestas going to buy more? I don't think so. So the concern is, obviously, for TPI, what is it going to look like going forward? If you have purchased Vestas turbines or GE Vernova turbines, are you going to have the blades that you have purchased in time? Great questions to ask. I think on the other side is, if you do own GE Vernova or Vestas turbines, and they're made by TPI, where the technical aspects lie, what do you do? What should you be thinking about if you're a large operator of some of these turbines? How should you be planning for the future here? What are you thinking about?
So let's divide it into two categories. One of them is turbine blades on order,
Supply chain.
and the other one's being turbine blades already in production or received order.
I'm not sure that we can fully look at them separately, though, right? Because if you have them, if they're yours and they're under a service agreement or something, eventually you might be in the queue for a replacement that you need, right? That your OEM would be on the hook for.
That raises another question there then. Because I don't know this, maybe you do, Alan. Does a bankruptcy qualify as a force majeure event?
Oh, not in terms of like lightning would be, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, but can they claim force majeure and be like, out of our control. So now the turbine supply agreements are, basically have to be rewritten. Timelines have to be rewritten. Yolanda, to your point, if we have a blade that we need for production, am I not responsible for LDs anymore because the blade manufacturer went into bankruptcy?
I think it'd be more of either now you're not just in the queue for TPI blades, but you're in the queue for whatever we can retrofit there, right? That they could put in.
Yeah, the alternative is you need a whole set, though, right? So if we say, like, I need a blade from TPI or I need an entire set of LM blades, now you're triple the cost. Who has to pay for that?
I really would hope that they wouldn't go this route, but I think some OEMs would just hit liquidated damages and stop.
That's what I think too. I mean, we've seen that happen with some of the OEMs, is that they had LDs and that's it. There's nothing going forward. They're fine doing that. That's the only play that they have. I am deeply concerned what GE Vernova is about to do in the wind business because of their gas turbine and everything else are so profitable. And they just announced that the wind business in 2026 is not likely to make any positive cash flow. The discussion inside of GE Vernova, at least at the sort of the boardroom level, must be really tense, because in theory they could buy TPI's assets in the factories and run them, but they just went through essentially a liquidation process with LM. Do they want to run another company, especially when they're bleeding cash in that particular business? I think the answer, GE historically, has been no. If we're not number one or number two, we're getting the heck out of that business. That was the Jack Welch of running GE. And anybody that worked for GE knew that loud and clear because they said it all the time. Those same people that grew up in that GE culture are now in the boardroom. And what are they likely to do? They're likely to follow that advice because that's just what they know. It's the school they went to. Are they going to change their mind and say a longer term play is wind and we want to stay in it and we're willing to lose a couple $100 million a year for the next couple of years, and now we're going to run a blade factory with several thousand employees down in Mexico? I just don't see it. I could be totally wrong about that. Probably am. But today, sitting at the beginning of January of 2026, I don't think GE Vernova wants to be in the blade manufacturing business if they can at all avoid it.
I think it's important for owners to start thinking a lot more about educating their internal teams on what they can. So if you know people within your OEM that you can trust and that can help you learn how to self-service some of your blades, that would be great. If it's through ISPs that you can trust, if it's a hodgepodge of items, I think it's really important for owners right now to start building that up, because it will take a while and the risk is there.
That wraps up another episode of the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast. And if today's discussion sparked any questions or ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's conversation, please leave us a review. It really helps other wind energy professionals discover the show. And we will catch you here next week on the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast.